It's time for Dark Tea Time, the first official Dark Tea Time, my friends. Welcome to the show. We're here to talk about some Guild Wars 2 PvE balance. We're going to talk about the history a little bit. We're going to talk about, where we are right now and hopefully where we're going as well. A lot of topics to cover here. A lot of exciting things are going on.
If you're willing to play meta builds, or which I define as anything good, like there's no class or elite spec that's off the table. It's easily the best it's ever been. It's so good that I dare say that, there are still maybe a handful of outliers that maybe could be brought up a little bit, but I dare say that like from now on, their energy can almost go towards reworks rather than like having to tweak numbers on like stuff that they've been messing with for a long time.
The skill expression of Guild Wars 2, I think, actually complicates the meta a lot. Because it's really hard to tell if... Let's imagine that you see a Reaper in your group, and they're doing 5k DPS. You might go, holy shit, Reaper is trash, right? But then but realistically, it's just that player is maybe not very experienced on Reaper, and they're not doing very well. And I think this also messes with perception, because a lot of the time, you very rarely... Okay, because here's the really big meme. Oh, Nike, I'm gonna get roasted for this one. Here's a big take. Let me tell you a little secret, guys. And here's the deal. All right, gamers. It's time. It's time for Dark Tea Time, the first official Dark Tea Time, my friends. Welcome to the show. We're here to talk about some Guild Wars 2 PvE balance. We're going to talk about the history a little bit. We're going to talk about, where we are right now and hopefully where we're going as well. A lot of topics to cover here. A lot of exciting things are going on. The Reaper mains, they're celebrating right now. Nike thinks they might still complain. Who knows? Honestly, I think they'll always complain. Someone's always going to complain about it. The rotation's not right. I'm doing 1k DPS too, not enough, right? I need to be doing at least 50k DPS minimum for this to be considered viable. But anyway, let's talk about this topic. The most complained about topic ever, Guild Wars 2 balance. And to start off, because I think this is something that you've brought up a fair bit, Nike, actually, in some of the conversations I've seen you have on Twitter, okay, in Discord servers. You're having a good time there. I think a lot of players don't know how good we have it in terms of variety and options and balance right now. And I really wanted to highlight that early on in this tea time so that nobody can miss it. Because I really do think we're in a pretty remarkably good state of the game when it comes to what you can play, what's good, right? Like what good builds are there. And I think you can make just about anything work. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, unless you're like an extreme role player who has to have an exact combination of weapon traits that don't necessarily make sense. Like, if you're willing to play meta builds, or which I define as anything good, then yeah, like there's no class or elite spec that's off the table.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's easily the best it's ever been. It's so good that I dare say that, there are still maybe a handful of outliers that maybe could be brought up a little bit, but I dare say that like from now on, their energy can almost go towards reworks rather than like having to tweak numbers on like stuff that they've been messing with for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, the numbers are really going in the right direction. I was about to say, one of those outliers might be Berserker. But actually, funny enough, Berserker is actually finally getting juiced up. Apparently, it's going above 40k DPS next patch. Going to be very exciting. You can be a Berserker main. You can swing your axe around and do some serious DPS, of course. A little bit of funkiness with the extra 15% critical strike chance, but we can maybe talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I think I'd even go a step further. I think what's really remarkable, actually, is that I think almost every weapon on every specialization and every profession is useful in some way. There are very few exceptions to that, but overall, certainly from a PvE perspective, almost everything can be made to work. Obviously, not everything is as strong as everything else, right? There are some builds that are better than others, but broadly speaking, if you want to use a certain weapon on a certain profession, you can find a build that will actually do something useful and perform well with that combination. Yeah, if you want to there are limitations that, you know, maybe if you want to be like a longbow greatsword warrior, that's maybe not going to be the way to go. But overall, things I would say are in a pretty good spot. But yes, there are a few things like warrior rifle, maybe a little bit questionable, but hey, you can go one-shot some people in world versus world, so maybe you can have some fun there, I guess. You know,
I mean, honestly, if you're a good player and you're in like a random strike IBS 5 strike pug and you play like greatsword rifle berserker,
yeah,
I mean, you're gonna blend right in.
Yeah.
Like it's, I mean, there's people that like DPS race the healers on DPS in strike pugs. So as long as you're like somewhere in the middle there, no one will notice that you're kill shotting the
exactly
boss.
Yeah, so you can have your rifle warrior RP with the you know, you can make that happen, you can make that work. Scepter Mesmer. Scepter is actually good on tank, actually, for generating clones. If you go for like a tank or heal Chronomancer, boom, got him. Nice. Look at the chat. They're trying to you know, stump us. Failure. You have failed to do so. But anyway, I think that's actually pretty cool. And I think there's another aspect to this as well. And this actually came up recently with Preach playing the game, actually. This idea that you kind of need these... you need to have quickness healers, right? You need to have alacrity healers. They need to kind of fit together in this like semi-complicated mesh. And I actually think ArenaNet has also done a good job of handling that, actually, because there are so many options and different ways that you can actually do this, and almost every profession now has a lot of variety in what you can do. If you play a warrior, well, funnily enough, if you play a warrior, you probably are just a DPS. Warrior is actually one of the classes that struggles with this a little bit. Doesn't really have that level of, you know, you don't really have the ability to have a support option there. But pretty much everything else, you can actually have something that gives a boon in some way, something that can heal a little bit in some sense. How you can play Heal Thief these days, Heal Chronomancer. There's a lot of variety with what's going on. So I think there are more options than we've ever had. Like, gone are the days where every single group was just 2 druids, 2 warriors, 2 Chronomancers. That was the end of it. I think, you know, I think people forget how recently this stuff actually started to happen as well. Like, bear in mind, gamers, that at the start of Path of Fire, Firebrand and Renegade weren't really good, right? They just weren't actually very strong. And
Firebrand was good as a DPS, but you wouldn't play it as a support. Yeah. Because Chrono was just better.
It took a while before that actually came into the metagame, right? And now you have so many options and combinations. I think it's very important to kind of think about the way people approach the game as well. So you might go, well, hang on a minute. Whenever I go into a pug, I always see the same builds. And that's true. And a big part of that is usually because these builds are maybe like a little bit better. They're not like massively better, but they're like a good chunk better than the other options. And here's the thing. In MMOs, I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. If something is 5% better, everyone's playing it. Right? That's just the way it works, right? People love to optimize. People like to go with the strongest possible strategy, the strongest possible build, right? And players play what they know works, right? So you have these habits forming. And I think this is what leads to quite a distorted view of the meta. I think, you know, I saw this post, and this is kind of what prompted me wanting to have a conversation like this, actually, is I saw a conversation thread. I believe it was on the subreddit. And it was quite highly upvoted, and it said, I want the Heart of Thorns meta back. It was so much better balanced back then. And
that's unhinged. That
was just whoa. But here's the thing. I didn't just go, oh, this person is unhinged. This is not good. Okay. I thought, okay, well, why is this person saying this? And I think it's because when you go into groups, you do not see that much variety. You'll see some variety in terms of the DPS, I think, that gets played, but a lot of the supports are relatively standard, right? You're going to see your Firebrands, you're going to see your Mechs, you're going to see your Heralds, all that kind of stuff popping up. So I think I understand why this is the case, but I really do think it's important to recognize that actually the reason this happens is just because of the way players typically engage with games, right? And the way I'd kind of I'd kind of bring this up or contextualize this is by thinking about gold farming, right? Realistically, gold farming in the game, no matter what you do, it's going to be about, like 20 gold an hour-ish. That's kind of where you end up in this situation. This is kind of where you end up. But if there's a gold farm that's 21 gold per hour, you betcha that's where everyone's going, right? Everyone's going to surge towards the slightly better farm. Everyone always does the most efficient farms in the game that they possibly can. These are the really, really popular maps. These are the maps where everyone tends to go, rather than the slightly less efficient maps, right? This is just the nature of the way that people engage with the game. And the same thing is true when it comes to balance, right? Like, especially when you get into the more challenging content, right? Players want to get the job done the best they can, so they'll typically play the strongest possible builds. But that doesn't mean that things aren't good. Builds can be incredibly powerful without necessarily being popular, right? And it just means that you haven't seen anyone play it.
Yeah, and I think there's an added wrinkle with Guild Wars 2 in that the choke point is sort of the fractal meta. So you'll have players that they gear... The fractal meta is a lot stricter, right? In what pugs expect. So they'll go, well, I'm gonna gear my firebrand for fractals and be like the heal brand quickness guy. But then when they get to raids, they're not going to go, oh, now that I'm in raids, I can finally gear my quickness scrapper and play that. No, they're just going to keep playing the same thing that they're already playing for fractals. And so it creates like this choke point where players play fractals, they gear their build for fractals, and they just play the same build in raids. And yeah, they could play something else because there's freedom, but they're not gonna because they don't want to play multiple builds.
I think that's a very good point. I do think that the fractal meta very much does lead it because it is such a high priority piece of content. It's a lot more popular than squad content. And of course, it's also incredibly profitable, right? It's very, very rewarding. So players really want to get in on the action there with those fractals. And you're absolutely right. The meta there is a bit more defined because it turns out that if you want to win, you want to have loads of stability and Aegis. And it turns out those are actually somewhat uncommon, right? Like, there aren't that many things that can do that super, super well. And of course, one in particular, like Firebrand, performs that role extremely well and generates some very, very good results in that regard, which does tend to lead to this slight distortion of the meta across the entirety of the game. And I would even say that this is... it gets a little bit weirder as well because of the way the Guild Wars 2 meta is defined. I think you brought this up as well, is that the meta is very healer defined, right? You're always going to build your comp from the healer up. So if Heal Firebrand is really, really good in fractals, well, good news. You're going to see a million Heal Firebrands absolutely everywhere. And Heal Firebrand obviously has particular synergies with other types of alacrity providers, right? Which will then naturally build the meta from there. For example, I think it's very common to see a Mechanist, right? An alacrity DPS Mechanist paired with a Firebrand. And the reason for that is because those two go really well together, right? They just glue together. They gel really well. And as a result of that, that further distorts the meta, right, with the way that people approach it, because you have your healer synergizes specifically with other counterparts, right, and less so with others, and that means that you then have an even more kind of like a ripple effect, right, from this one build. Like, the one build of Heal Firebrand almost disproportionately distorts how people play the game, not only because it's strong in a particular game mode, but also because it synergizes specifically with other builds that then ripples out to other game modes too.
Yep.
Yeah. It's pretty spicy stuff. It really is. And that's a bit of a tricky one to solve, really. You know, I guess you just have to make the builds a bit more well-rounded, I guess, so they all synergize with each other, or maybe share some of the stuff out, I guess, or even change the design of fractals. Hard to get around without massively homogenizing everything. And I think we want to be careful about this. Like, I think the obvious response is, okay, well, we'll just give Aegis and stability to everyone. Well, be careful what you wish for, because if you do that, you kind of end up with like a big soup of builds and nothing really does anything special anymore. And they're all completely undefined. It's just like a really big mush. I'm not sure that's exactly desirable. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what ArenaNet's going to do about that. Good luck, ArenaNet. have fun. By the way, it's gonna be a fun task. It really, really is.
Yeah, I don't know. I almost don't think they care about the fractal meta like nearly as much as the raid meta. It definitely feels like a lot of the balance, and rightly so, because there's certain builds like, I mean, look at this patch, for example. Reaper and Berserker were two of the things that got buffed, and even if those are great now, you're still not going to see them very often in fractals, no matter what. Like, there's just burstier DPS options. So it does definitely give the impression that they look, when it comes to PvE at least, they look at raids as the thing that they have to balance around, or strikes, or 10-man content, and that fractals maybe an afterthought in terms of balance.
Isn't that, wait, hang on though, isn't that incredibly strange considering what we just said though? Is that the meta is very heavily influenced by fractals, and of course I think they're a lot more popular. That actually strikes me as very odd that they seem to balance based on the squad content.
Yeah, I just don't think that, like, you can point at their balance decisions and go, ah, yes, they're doing this to fix the fractal meta, or to influence the fractal meta. They're just, that is not what I read when I see the patch notes.
Okay. Yeah, that is odd, I suppose. Maybe they should look at that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know how you do it. I don't know. I mean, I guess like you said, they could give Scrapper stability, which would probably help, but
yeah, there's definitely a few things that can be done to improve this. I do actually think that stability I feel like is less the problem. I feel like it's almost ageist at this stage, and the fact that Firebrand has so much, I guess they have reduced it a little bit with the heal skill, of course, being altered, but it's still a pretty dominant force in that regard with what it can actually do, right? In terms of what it can bring to the table. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. That hasn't really been addressed, and I think we're going to see some slightly more major moves actually coming up in the June 27th patch, and they kind of talked about this a little bit in the recent little mini update. How the May 2nd patch, which is coming up right now, it's going to be a slightly smaller edition, right? It can be a few tweaks here and there, and they've really gone hard on the numbers, and I love to see that, right? It really is fantastic to see that they figured out that if you just play with the numbers, people get really happy, right? Like Reaper going up to, I think, just under 40k, I think, or about 40k DPS. Berserker going to about 40k DPS as well. We love to see that. Just some pretty fun changes I think players are really going to enjoy. Of course, they didn't get everything. There will always be some outliers, right? Maybe they should have done something with Daredevil, although I think that might require a little bit more work to actually make that a little bit more sense.
The Thief mains were not happy.
The Thief mains were not happy. Yeah, they were not happy.
They were like, they saw that line that was like, we think Thief is in a great place
spot,
in PvE, and all the Thief mains are like, what the hell are you talking about? No one plays Thief anywhere. Like, what?
Yeah. And, yeah. One thing that I think also really does interact with the play rate of a lot of specs, and this is something that I really hope they focus on actually in the June 27th update, is playability. I think this has been one of the big problems right now in the metagame for a long time, is that some elite specializations basically have to spam all their buttons in order to do stuff, right? Like your Spectres have to completely spam everything, Herald has to spam everything, Druid has to spam everything. I think that actually massively affects play rates, because players, I think when you're evaluating a build, you're looking at, okay, how good is this? How annoying is it to play, basically, right? And how much work is it going to take me to get to this point, right? Those are kind of like, I think, some of the factors that you might look at when you're evaluating what build you want to play. And as you'd expect, a lot of the builds that actually see a huge amount of popularity are pretty effective, not necessarily the most effective, right? Not the strongest. And are pretty easy, and also aren't annoying, right? Aren't annoying to play. And I think a really good example of this is actually looking at the healers. For example, Druid is actually the strongest healer right now, guys, pound for pound. But even though Druid is a massive RP spec that I think is super popular, people love Druid, I think, thematically, it's not actually as popular as you'd expect given its current power level. And I think a huge reason for that is because spirits are kind of annoying and not that much fun to use. Whereas builds like Mechanist and Firebrand, I think, are much more playable in that support role, in the support position. It's a little bit less annoying to play those. I think you could make a similar thing for, say, Alacrity Heal Spectre, and also for Heal Herald. I think that Heal Herald is actually a very powerful build. It simply doesn't see that much play, because I think players maybe don't like the playstyle as much compared to the more smooth playstyles that the other supports have. And I really hope that ArenaNet target this. And I think this is true for the offensive supports as well, by the way, gamers. If you look on paper at something like the Warrior banners, this is going to be such a meme, okay? This is going to be such a meme here. But if you look at the Warrior banners, they're actually quite strong, right, with what they do. The problem is that you kind of can't separate the effects out, making it a kind of a frustrating build to play around sometimes with the way that you have to apply your boons. If they actually improve the playability of that, I really think that Quickness Warrior could actually be a thing. It could be pretty powerful, I think, if it was correctly utilized and they slightly redesign those abilities. Spectre is another really, really good example. It's an incredibly powerful build, but Wells are kind of annoying. Look, I played a bit of Spectre, guys. The Wells, they annoy me. I admit it. Even though the build is very, very strong and it can be a very, very strong carry, actually, it's just annoying. It's not that much fun to play, to be honest, which I think massively influences the play rates.
I hate to be the guy who gets buffs to his spec and then continues to complain about it, but I think that Berserker fits this description. It's got to if you don't weapon stow your Great Sword Burst, you can just take 1k DPS right off the top of the benchmark. If for some reason you fuck up and your Berserk uptime drops from 100% to like any other number, your DPS is now not good. It's worm tier. It's real bad. And it's not a good outcome. And then it also requires you to press every button on your bar on cooldown while juggling a pretty fast playstyle in terms of weapon skills. Like, there's no like 3-second break where you're channeling Meteor Shower where you get to like pause and like evaluate where you are with your cooldowns and what's coming up next. You're pretty much constantly going. Once you hit that Berserk button and you go into Berserk mode, the train has left the station and you better be on it. So yeah, it's the type of thing that I think it'll have a good golem number because the people that are good at benching will get a lot out of it, especially on like those, like I forget who's the guy on the SC Discord who's all about Berserker, but yeah, the average player is going to have completely garbage results compared to what they could do with Spellbreaker. And that will tell over time. Like, maybe you prefer to play Berserker, but you know, if the Spellbreaker in the group is doing like 25k and you're doing like 18, that doesn't feel great. Like after a while.
And I do think this is where it really does help to differentiate the elite specializations a little bit more. When I look at Warrior, I do think that, and I'm curious what you think of this as a Warrior Lord, Warrior main, of course. I think that when specializations kind of compete against themselves, all being kind of different flavors of damage dealer, I think that does actually have a bit of a balance issue, because you're going to be, I feel like with Warrior, you're always going to be thinking, well, why would I play this when I could play the other elite spec that does the same thing but kind of better, right? It's a very weird position that some elite specializations find themselves in, because they're competing against other elite specializations of the same profession, right? I think it's okay to have, this profession does slightly less DPS than this other profession, because it's kind of, that's an external competition, I guess, and it's an inevitability that, you know, not everything's going to be the same power level. But when you have this internal competition, it's just weird. I think it's important that elite specializations do have their niche and their special thing that they do, at least when offset to other elite specializations within a profession.
Yeah, I think as far as Warrior goes, like, I'm not super unhappy with it, because there's certain bosses where like Bladesworn is just better. Like I think like Harvest Temple is like the clear example where even if it wasn't a structure, you would still prefer Bladesworn there. And there's several bosses, like I would say like Gorseval, where if you were going for the absolute like best DPS, you would probably play Bladesworn there, just because you can, pre-charge your thing during the invuln phase, and as soon as he comes out of his invuln, you slash him. And various things like that, like Sabbatha, same way. Like you can time when the ad's getting to 25% so that you slash as soon as she comes down. But then there's other fights where Spellbreaker is better. And some of that has to do with the fact that, like I said, structures, Spellbreaker loses like 30% DPS against bosses that count as structures. So it's like actually, I would say, unplayable at stuff like Conjured Amalgamate or like Harvest Temple, stuff like that. But yeah, so like because of that, there is like a nice split between the two.
I think that's a bit weird, though, isn't it? Isn't that
kind of
relying
artificial.
on a bug? Yeah, that's kind of relying on a bug almost, right? Like in that situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that like, but they'll never fix it. They're never gonna make Harvest Temple not count. They're never gonna make like, structures count as having a Defiance bar. That's just never gonna happen.
I mean, you don't think so? Like, I surely they. I mean, wait, didn't they kind of improve this at some point though already? Didn't they make this better? They changed. I mean, didn't they change the? Yeah, it's a bit different. They changed the traits to always consider bosses that can't be CC'd as having it as so it activates on those. Couldn't they? I mean, is this the moment where you're going to say, haha, it's ArenaNet, they can't do that? But
well, no, and Narson's right in chat. Like the other issues that on CA, like the hitbox is so far that your Mage Bane tether breaks. But there's also other bosses like what's the one, the Shiver Peaks Pass. Like obviously that's not like important, but the hitbox is so big that the Mage Bane tether instantly breaks, and for whatever reason, it doesn't count as having a Defiance bar. I just don't see them ever like fixing these things, so I don't know.
Okay, well, I guess that's fair enough.
But yeah, I that is like, and there is the point of view of going, well, it's good that they're sort of equal in that if you
can play whatever you want, right?
If you roleplay as a Bladesworn and you don't want to play Spellbreaker, like you're not like, spiting yourself and playing a bad build on fights. Yeah, you're more or less can play what makes you feel happy.
Yeah, I definitely think it is highly desirable to have more or less everything in about the same spot, right? Ish, like within reason. And I think, the game is not doing such a bad job of that right now. I'm going to get memed for saying that because there's definitely a bit of a DPS spread, okay? We've got the top builds are mostly, they're a little over 40k right now is kind of where they're at. And I think some of the builds on the lower end are more towards the 35,000 DPS. But think about it. That is actually not bad, right? Okay, if we're talking about like the most scuffed build to the best build in the game in terms of actual like raw output, the difference is not actually that significant. And this is what I really want to highlight with this TeaTime actually is it's a lot better than I think the vast majority of the community actually perceives it to be, right? And we kind of went over some of the reasons why that is the case. But realistically, you should not go, oh, I can't play this build because it does 3k DPS less. Oh no, it's unplayable. This is a complete disaster. Well, you shouldn't be going like, oh man, I can't play my... I think the really funny one is Quickness Scrapper, although Scrapper is actually quite popular, but people always ask me, like, Teapot, when will Quickness Scrapper be viable? I'm like, it's viable right now. In fact, it's very good right now. The viable word terrifies me. It's just...
You're going to have to start playing it
on
stream.
I think that actually, that kind of leads me on to the next topic here. I really think that there's a huge issue right now with the way that people don't see enough builds. And I actually do take responsibility for that. Yes, we as the streamers, we must play weird builds on stream as much as possible so that people know that actually you can do well on them. And I'm kind of serious though. What actually happens is that players... Okay, when someone says, I never see this build anywhere. I'll often have a conversation that goes like this. Someone will say, hey, is this build good? And I'll say, yeah, it is good. And they go, how is it good? I never see anyone play it. And that's a very interesting kind of logical chain. Let's kind of think about what's going on there. They're going, I never see this build, therefore it is bad. Because if it was good, people would play it, right? And that kind of makes sense, right? Like, I can see where that kind of comes from. But of course, as we mentioned previously, realistically, people tend to really try and go for the best in slot, right? That's how people always go, right? People try to optimize things. They go for the best gold farms, right? The most efficient routes of getting everything done daily, right? The best maps, right? And yeah, you play the best builds a lot of the time. That's typically how things go, especially in instance content. And this really does start this kind of vicious cycle. Players don't see a build, think it's bad, play the build that they perceive to be, you know, the best in slot build, and then even less people see that build, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And also, I think there's a secondary thing as well with this that also happens, where people go, it goes something like this. These people are searching for a specific build. That means if I made my own group with this build, nobody would join it, right? They go, oh man, this group only wants a heal firebrand. That means if I join, one, I won't be able to play, but two, if I make a group and I say, well, I'm playing Heal Herald, nobody will join me. This is also incorrect. Because, look, I'll tell you a little secret here, guys. I'm going to tell you a secret. In pug groups, in fractals, and in raids, and in squads, in strikes, honestly, people don't care that much. I have played in I've been playing almost exclusively in 0 kill proof, full fiesta, all welcome groups recently, and people play some wacky stuff, and absolutely nobody cares, right? In fact, I'll go even further. People play wacky builds, don't play very well, hugely underperform, and no one cares. Maybe like they're grumbling in their guild chat, or they're going, wow, look at this noob. But actually, nobody cares whatsoever. I can almost guarantee you that you play some weird meme builds, well, maybe not that weird, but if you play some slightly unusual builds that maybe aren't that common, you're actually not really going to have a lot of difficulty whatsoever. And I do think that actually a lot of the problems with the metagame and the problems with balancing Guild Wars 2 are actually community-oriented. Seriously, I know I don't want to blame the player base, because that doesn't obviously, you know, well, I guess you kind of can blame the player base a little bit. I'm not sure we should let ourselves get away with this, but I do think a huge amount of the issues are actually user-defined rather than from the game as of right now. That's not to say that there aren't any that are from the game. We've already gone over plenty that are, but I do think it takes two to tango here. I think ArenaNet are holding up their end of the bargain right now by improving things and targeting key issues with the balance in Guild Wars 2, but I also do think there is some work to be done on the community side with knowledge transference, and overall understanding of how the game plays out that do really need to be improved. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck, because builds are just not going to end up seeing play if the community simply doesn't play them, right? ArenaNet can make all the good builds they want, but if people don't play them, then people don't play them.
Yeah, I don't know how much, like, ArenaNet needs to care about that. If ArenaNet knows that the build is good and people haven't figured it out yet, then, you know, give people time. Let them figure it out. I don't think ArenaNet needs to, like, do anything about that necessarily.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of low information people, and you're not going to be able to reach them all. And, like, their connection with the game, you know, like, with the greater community might be, like, dropping into a stream once every 3 months just to see what people are doing and going, oh, okay, that's what that is, and then that's how that's their catch up on the meta for another 3 months.
And so the reason I bring this up actually is because there was a great thread on the subreddit. I love the Guild Wars 2 subreddit. I love it, except when they post about AFK farmers and Maguma. Okay, well actually I kind of like the Maguma post. I admit it. I kind of like the Maguma post. I kind of like the Maguma post. I admit that. I take that back.
I wonder what. It seems like a certain percentage of them are Maguma players posing as
it's
anti-Maguma
psyops.
players.
It's a huge psyop. It's definitely a psyop, or at least some of them.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like that Maguma wins because they're the best.
Yeah.
And all the other people that are afraid to fight them have all these rationalizations for why they can't beat Maguma, and it all comes down to them just being bad. And frankly, they're just terrible. Their servers are bad. They can't fight Maguma. They can't win.
Making a clip there? Is that you're trying to get a clip going?
They can't beat Maguma because they're bad. They say stuff like, yeah, but we just don't like that play style. It's like, well, then you're bad. Yeah. It's like, imagine you're going to, like to go back to the classic Serlin loser mentality thing. You go to a Street Fighter 2 tournament and like Blanca is the best character. And you're like, well, I'm not playing Blanca because I don't like the play style. It's like, well, then you're fucking bad. Like, deal with it. Maguma has figured out how to beat your dumb melee ball. Your melee boon ball, and they spawn camp you, and it's not because they're not doing it because like they're hacking the game. No, they're doing it because you fucking can't kill them, and they can kill you. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And these people all act like they're like we're not actually like trying to. We're just bored when we're matched up. We want to get to a server where we're gonna fight other people. It's like, no, you just don't want to get spawn camped because you're fucking bad. Like, beat them. And then they have the nerve to claim that they're good and that they're a good server and they know how to, they can fight and they're good. And like, no, you've proven that you're not. You've ducked the best. You intentionally lost in order to duck the best team. That's fucking bad, man. Like, if you intentionally throw so that you can dodge the best team, like, what does that say about you? That's pathetic.
Ooh. Wow. There you go. And that's the next Zach song coming up. But anyway, to go back to
what's toxic about that? It's the truth. You guys need to wake up. If you can't, like, spawn camp Mag and then tell me you're good. That's when I'll believe you're good, when you have them spawn camped.
Ooh. Well, there you go, I guess. I think the most recent post was Maguma having a bit of trouble there recently, to be fair, actually. I believe ArenaNet claimed Maguma home keep, actually. So EB keep even, I think.
What does Darkbringer fly hack over the walls and get in there?
Yeah. So I mean Maguma is tanking. People listen to your advice. So I mean I guess they're welcome.
That's good.
Yeah, that's
Go
good.
ahead.
But anyway, kind of back to back to what I was kind of going there. The reason I was kind of bringing up all these issues around perception was that there was a great thread. There was a really high effort thread that I really enjoyed reading, and it was talking about issues that players have with getting into raids, right, and getting into squad content, and not just raids. Well, I know we always talk about raids here, but and everything like fractals, strikes, right, raids, it was about instance content, right, is what it was about. And I think they made some really awesome points about stuff like the LFG system, right, talking about stuff like resources, social aspects of it, right? There's a lot of really great points there. But they also, one of the key things they brought up was balance. And they said stuff like, oh man, players don't want to engage in this content because they want to play their particular build, right? And not necessarily, like carrying Longbow Ranger, but they gave a few examples of Heal Tempest and Hammer Warrior.
Yeah, they were completely outdated examples.
Yeah. And I think that is so interesting because Heal Tempest, by the way, guys, it honestly got good and people started playing it towards the end of Heart of Thorns. And it was good through Path of Fire and into Ender Dragons, right? So some of this information isn't just old, it's like really, really old. And I think that's what a lot of players are. I think a lot of players go like, dude, I wish I could play my Hammer Warrior in raids, but it's like 2k DPS. No, Hammer Warrior is 40k DPS right now. Heal Tempest is actually really good and has been really good for a long time, right? And this post was, I think, an excellent post and very well put together. And
he undercut all the rest of the post by dabbling in a thing he obviously didn't know about, and it really called into question. Well, it damaged the credibility of everything else he said by dabbling in something that I think so.
I think it reinforced it. I think it reinforced it because in a way that okay, wasn't the poster actually exhibiting the effect that they're describing essentially?
Well, I mean, if he's going to talk about like, oh, the LFG system needs this change, and this change, it's like, okay, that's fine. But then when you're like, oh, I can't get into raids because no one will let me play Hammer Warrior. It's like, well, now I'm suspicious of the fact that you even tried. Like now I don't believe that you have ever tried because
Well, no, I don't
your
think
example, like
I
your
don't think that was
balanced
their claim.
understanding is like 8 months out of date, which means like, what the fuck is this? Is this AI generated? Like,
I don't think that was the claim that the user was making. I think the user was suggesting that that perhaps they themselves and loads of other players have perceptions and assumptions around raids that and squad content and group content in general that potentially prevents them from wanting to get into it, or maybe thinking that they aren't able to do so, right? Rather than saying, oh yeah, I tried and I got kicked on my Hammer Warrior. I think it's more a lot of players don't they kind of go, oh man, you know, I'd love to try this, but it seems that everyone says I can't do this because of the build that I'm playing. Or, oh, I really want to play this build, but I guess it doesn't work here, right? So that's not allowed. You don't think that was kind of the direction they were coming from, I think?
I mean, if so, he probably should have cited examples that were real and contemporary.
Well, okay.
Which would be hard because, as we said, almost everything is good.
Well, no, what I mean,
so...
I think what's going on is that I don't think the user was. I don't think the point is that, oh, the balance is completely whack. I think the point is that people think the balance is off, right? And they think that you have to play very strict builds and strict meta builds to get into this content, whereas that perception isn't accurate, right?
Yeah. I think you're giving him too much credit. Sorry.
Well, I think there's I think there's an interesting conversation to be had there, right?
Yes, but that's not the conversation he was having. It's a conversation you want to have.
Yep.
You want to have that conversation, and I think his mind was, these are some bad builds that people want to play, and they want to be able to play them. So ArenaNet needs to fix the balance of the game. And you're suggesting that it's an issue of people not being aware that these are good, but and that's true in his case because he's obviously not aware that they're good. But personally, I wouldn't write my 10,000 word manifesto unless I was pretty sure what I was typing was accurate, because it does. That's the thing with the internet. You could write 10,000 words, but you write one inaccurate sentence. And you look at the replies, every reply will be quoting your one inaccurate sentence and throwing you in the trash compactor over it. That's all there is to it. Like you have to get, you got to get somebody to edit, look over your thing and edit you.
Well, yeah, okay, sure. But I think that the conversation I think that is interesting that can be spawned from some of these posts and some of these ideas is that, yeah, the way players perceive the game is very much informed by what they see in the game, right? And by the way, someone brought up that, oh, nobody cares about balance. I actually disagree with that, by the way. I get a lot of people saying, hey guys, I just started, and this happens a lot in my Twitch chat and in YouTube comments. People go, I never see X build in open world. Is it good? Why is everyone playing X build in open world, right? This is not actually just an instance content thing. Because, yeah, players care about their character. Do you know what one of the #1 questions I get is as a streamer? And by the way, if you don't believe me, go and check out, there's a mega popular video by, I think the guy's name is Kaiosaka, I think is his name. I don't know, I probably mispronounced that. This YouTube guy, he's made a video talking about like what build you should play and going over all the elite specs. It has 600,000 views, guys. Yeah, people really care about this stuff. They care about like what build they want to play and what character they want to make. It's an RPG, guys, remember? It's not just a gem store mount, swipe simulator. Maybe we forgot that. But seriously, yeah, like this is a really common thing that comes up is like, what's good? What build is good in PvE? What build is good in PvP? What's good in world versus world, right? This is one of the most common questions people have. And it comes up all the time, even in open world, even in, even before people have started the game, people want to know what's good. And yes, is the balance relevant? No, realistically, balance is not that relevant in open world content because open world content isn't tuned very strictly. But players are still interested. They want to be powerful, right? They want to play a powerful character, right? I mean, who wouldn't, right? Who doesn't want to be like a Giga Chad in the video game, right? And really contributing and being able to achieve your goals and so on. So yeah, this is an issue. And when players do have a perception, that can really turn you off from content, right? Like if you really enjoy playing your warrior and someone says to you, oh yeah, hey, warrior sucks, then you're going to go, oh, that feels bad. Or if someone says, hey, you'll never get into a raid group with that build, you're going to go, oh, that feels pretty bad, right? And yeah, sure, you could poke around a little bit and find out that that's not true, but I think that's an unreasonable expectation to have a lot of the time. So I think that there is actually a really important thing that does need to happen within the community here when it comes to actually improving this information transference and making sure that players are aware that, you know what, yeah, you actually can play these builds. Yes, Heal Tempest has been a good time, has been really good for a long time. And it is hard to communicate this. But like, for example, this was such a colossal failure. I was so disappointed by how ineffective this was because I actually got the world's first official sub 2 hour raid full clear on normal mode. And we played Heal Tempest, Heal Scourge, 5 DPS Necros, Warrior, and double Chrono, right? And my goal was like, look, I'm showing everyone that Heal Tempest can make you go fast, right? And you can go fast with Heal Tempest. And actually, it's an insanely strong build. But unfortunately, people were like, well, actually, Teapot, you guys are all really good at the game. So yeah, it doesn't matter what you guys play. And that's true, okay? But they kind of missed the point. They missed the point by the fact that we cleared all of this stuff insanely fast with the most ridiculously oversafe comp in existence. It seems to be very difficult to break through to people that, hey guys, yeah, these builds are actually really good. Heal Tempest wasn't actually bad throughout most of Path of Fire. In fact, it was incredibly good. In fact, look, this wasn't just me saying this, by the way. I actually spoke to Subi, a member from QT, and on stream, he said that most groups would actually probably do better with Tempest over the meta Druid at the time, right? Like, Tempest would actually outperform that simply because of how much more it healed compared to Druid at the time. With all that kind of stuff. But it's really hard to break through these assumptions and break through this information. It's a major issue that really holds back build diversity and what people end up playing, actually, because of the way things are perceived, because of the perception of the balance. The perception is disconnected from the reality. So I do think it's a major issue. It's a good conversation to have, I think. But I don't know. Maybe Nike, do you think there's just no hope? Maybe it's over. People just don't want their build to be good. They want to be able to complain about it. What do you think?
I mean, complaining is good. That's super fun. You get to go in the forums and, chatting. It's good. That's fun.
Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to main something. If you play one character for too long, it deletes your character.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think about that.
Yeah. Play what you want, gamers. Maybe not carrying Longbow Ranger, though. That's
I do
maybe not
like that, like you said, people are like always going for like information, trying to find it in places. I've got like ancient tier list videos from like the days of yore.
That still get a little,
from
get some views.
Yeah, like 2 years ago. They get at least one angry comment a week. Like, where they try to like make me feel bad.
Yeah.
Like, they'll be like, I stopped watching as soon as this idiot said that pet classes were not fun. Idiot. And I'm just like, oh my god, this is a year-old video and you're commenting like completely angry about it. Like, so mad that I said that minion mancers are not good.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Well, yeah, I think tier lists are really funny because I think that users, players really get invested in their character, right? And I get this as well. And by the way, this is another thing that really confirms that, yeah, people want to know what's good because people love tier lists. They absolutely love it. And when you say, oh yeah, this class, it's bad, people are going to go, what the fuck are you talking about? How dare you? How dare you say that my class is bad? This is unacceptable. You are wrong. It is actually S tier. It is actually overpowered, in fact. And if it isn't, it should be. Yeah.
Well, it's funny that people will like also like leave comments on tier lists that are like, this is a subjective opinion. And I'm like, yeah, If you want the objective opinion, you can go to Snow Crows and look at the DPS benchmark and like sort by highest to lowest, and there's your objective numbers. Everything else is going to be subjective. So what do you expect? Like, like you want, if you're watching this, it's because you want my subjective opinion.
Yeah, exactly. That is the point, and it is for content. It is for the content. What does condition damage actually do, though? I would think it's extra damage when I fulfill a condition, such as being in max range with my longbow. Thus, it would make perfect sense to give full carrion on my longbow. It's okay you think carrion sets are bad when your skills don't have any conditions to fulfill, but ranger happens to be a higher skill class. What is this copy pasta? That's
good. I support carrion longbow rangers.
Yeah, carrion longbow ranger. Maybe we should do Harvest Temple. We should do Suwon with 50 carrion longbow rangers. I think that would actually be easier than the healers. We already did 50 healers.
Are you sure about that?
Oh, but we wouldn't have. It would be easier. I think. Yeah, it would be easier. I'm pretty sure it would be, right?
I guess it's like, but you don't have the boon duration, which kind of helped the healers.
The protocols might save you.
Because the boons made up 66% of their DPS.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, boons are pretty good. Yeah. Boons are pretty good. They're very strong. Got to watch out for that.
The problem is no one's going to gear. You're not going to find 50 people who are willing to gear carrion longbow gear.
That is true. Yeah. It's a weird build. You have to spend some gold on that to pick that up. So it's a bit, a little bit questionable. Yeah, you have to be longbow and bear. You have to have the bear pet, guys. You need to make sure that happens. Otherwise, you're definitely in some serious trouble. Yeah, this is why you need legendary armor. You need legendary armor so that you can gear your carrion longbow ranger. It's pretty important.
Yeah, I can't waste a precious gear slot on that even.
But yeah, I guess that's the end of that particular topic. What are you hoping for in the next patch? What are some key issues that you want to see ArenaNet target with the way
Probably
the PvE
the width
balances
of the
in the
tunnel.
game? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I thought we were talking about that patch.
Yeah. So I mean, you think the tunnel needs to be wider, or what?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you're already hitting the walls, it doesn't need to be. I mean, you don't want it any wider. You're good.
Okay.
So there's that. But yeah, the tunnel. It's a meme already. I like where it's going.
Yeah. Do you think
I can't wait.
The meme is solid.
I think it's going to be good.
Okay, yeah. It should be pretty good. It will be an exciting patch, I think. I'm ready. I'm ready for the tunnel, guys.
I think we're to the point where if the tunnel's good, okay, great. It's good. And if the tunnel's real bad, people won't even be mad. They're just going to go, haha, it was everything I thought it wouldn't be. Haha. And like they're just going to make memes about it. So it's like, it's almost like the acceptance phase.
I think we're in a good spot. I think
the end of the tunnel is the acceptance phase. Like you crawl through, you walk into it with hope, and then you exit it in the acceptance phase. It's like oh, I'm here. You come up out of the tunnel and you're in the acceptance phase.
Yeah,
it's the tunnel to
acceptance.
Yeah,
to
it's like a copium detox. It's a copium detox tunnel essentially.
Yeah. And in all seriousness, I mean, in terms of the next patch, right, there is going to probably have the tunnel attached to it. There is actually a universe where I think it'd actually be rather good. Like, if there's a good boss in the tunnel, big, that could be huge, right? Like, there could be a massive encounter, an epic fight. You don't need to have a massive map, guys, this is what I said last time. Would you rather have the tunnel with an epic boss fight in it, or would you rather have Domain of Corner? Right, that's the question in terms of the content that you get. Right,
the tunnel. There's a million ways to make the tunnel cool.
Yeah,
they could do it.
Yeah, it could happen.
They will.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll definitely see. Anyway, to redirect that, what are you looking for in terms of balance from the next big patch? Because you know what's coming here, a few number tweaks here and there. Some things being made a little bit better, some bug fixes across the board there as well. But June 27th. What are some things that you want to see fixed? What's wrong with the game right now? What's wrong with the game, Nike?
What's wrong with the game?
Yeah. Well, I guess the balance.
Alacrity in open world still remains a problem. Probably it's the least fun aspect of open world gameplay.
Okay.
is that you look down at your buff bar and you have every boon except Alacrity, and you're like, something doesn't add up here. This isn't so good.
How do you think they can address that, though? Because I think quickness is almost inherently more fun. So everyone's going to go for that build. And I think the quickness ones are a bit stronger as well, which doesn't help. But the Alacrity builds, in general, I feel like they're not quite as much fun because quickness is fun.
Because if you have to play Alacrity solo, like if you happen to like, then you're just like, you're not feeling so hot. So the solution is you come out with like a new Jadebot chip thing that you can craft it, and it pulses on you a boon of your choice.
Ooh.
And it only works in open world or story. So I just get perma Alacrity when I'm walking around in open world. So basically,
massive power creep. We're adding power creep to the game, basically.
Well, you got to give up your 200 vitality or whatever it is.
Okay.
So you give up your 200 vitality and you get perma Alacrity in open world. That way I don't have to wait for, I don't have to get lucky and have people giving me Alacrity.
Maybe Renegade will be good, though. I think people like Renegade, because now Power Renegade is coming back. Big. Now everyone's going to run Alacrity.
I don't think so. I don't think they will.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not.
They just won't.
Yeah.
There'll probably be a lot of green Vindicators in open world.
Green Vindicator?
Yeah, Reaper.
Oh, Reaper. Ah, yes, of course, yeah. Yeah, Reaper is going to be all over the place. That build is going to completely destroy, actually. I wonder if people are going to go, wait a minute, I'm not doing any damage because I still have my full minions on. That could also be a possibility.
And I don't go into Shroud unless I need it because I'm going to die. They camp Greatsword, and they only go into Shroud if their health goes down.
Yeah.
Haha, you thought you were going to kill me, but I've activated my second health bar.
Here's a big question.
Gotcha.
Actually. Here's a big question. Do you want Heal Warrior?
No, I don't. I think maybe, they would need to give us a new weapon. Although I did think you could redo Mace so that, when you see someone with Mace, it procs an AoE heal. Maybe either add a trait for that or make it just build it into the Mace. Yeah. So that way there's actually some decent sustained healing possible.
Yeah. Because I think this is a really interesting spot. The way that ArenaNet seem to be taking the balance is every profession is going to have a quickness option. We know that Thief is going to be getting quickness and already has Alacrity with Deadeye. And every profession is going to have an Alacrity option. And probably every profession is going to have some kind of healer, right? So you can play any role, which broadly speaking is your quickness healer, your Alacrity healer, DPS quickness, DPS Alacrity, and then just regular DPS. You have kind of 5 things that you can do. But you can kind of break that down into an offensive support, a defensive support, and then a damage dealer, right? I think they want every single profession to be able to do all of those. Do you think that is desirable? Or do you think that is not actually good?
Depends on the implementation. I think what they did with Warrior and Ranger were not good. The way they gave quickness to Warrior and Alacrity to Ranger has just created a new can of worms that is bad because they're on the base class, which means it now affects everything you would ever do from now on to any elite spec in Warrior. You have to consider what the implications of having those things as base are, or any Ranger spec that they tweak, they have to consider the fact that it could potentially have perma-lack.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think so. I think they probably have to change that and put it on elite specializations instead. I see where they were going with it, right? They wanted to kind of transform the existing builds, right, into quickness and alacrity builds, right? They wanted, Druid, it heals and it uses spirits. So we'll give spirits alacrity. Warrior, banners, right? They were running double banner all the time, so let's just make those give quickness instead. So I understand where they were coming from there with that, but yeah, certainly probably a bit of an issue in the long-term design of the way the game worked out. And actually, that just occurred to me. The next patch is almost on the anniversary of the patch where every warrior player quit the game, right? Or just re-rolled. That's actually quite funny, isn't it?
That was a bad time.
Yeah.
It was dark.
That's right, gamers. Last year, June 28th, I believe, Harvest Temple Challenge Mode was added to the game. and Warrior was also removed from the game at the same time.
Bladesworn was still pretty good.
That's true. Yeah.
People didn't like it.
The other Warrior builds, they were a little bit removed from the game.
Yeah.
Vanna Warrior. Unlucky. So yeah, I'd like to see them actually rework that. And I mean, there are some like, kind of silly ideas or easy ideas that you could do. You can just give Alacrity to Grace of the Land, right? Boom. Druid now has Alacrity. Quickness can go to, I don't know, Untamed can have Quickness or something like that, right? Warrior, I don't know. If you're going to put Quickness on an elite spec for Warrior, where does it go?
I don't know. It seems... I mean, maybe I would put it on Berserker, just because Berserker is all about, like, chopping people fast with his axe, so, like, generating quickness seems reasonable.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, get rid of that awful trait that when you use a rage skill, it inflicts burning, which I don't think Power Berserker is going to take anymore because of the crit chance that they added to Smash Brawler. But it was so annoying that a Condi damage trait was like the best for power. But yeah, so make it so that, it gives like quickness when you use a rage skill. I don't know. That could be good.
It's a possibility. It absolutely is.
But yeah, like I was saying, like it's hard to think about like what needs to be fixed because
everything's quite fixed.
The game is in a good spot, and it's going to be more about like reworking stuff that like isn't fun. Like fun is going to be more the issue rather than tweaking numbers necessarily, because there's definitely some unfun things that they should fix.
Yeah. What's a big unfun thing? Because I think you talked about some aftercast manipulation that happens. Do you think that's really worth looking at? I mean, like, how much of a difference is it when you're dealing with, say, a Berserker build when it comes to canceling those aftercasts? How much of a big deal is it?
It's like 1 to 1.5k DPS if you don't cancel the Greatsword 4 aftercast, or the Greatsword Burst aftercast. Sorry. But yeah, and then like the Guardian Greatsword thing, I think for the most part they've gotten rid of but those two are still there, and I don't know. They should fix those.
Is that a big deal? Do you think that affects people in a major way?
I think it doesn't affect people who are low information because all they see is the benchmark, and they go, "Oh, benchmark looks good. I'm playing." But then it affects people that like want to play at a medium level because they join groups and they're like, "Man, I should be like one of the top DPS, but instead I'm like around the middle. Like, what gives? I don't get it." And it's because they're not doing this thing that, isn't even
right?
part of the written rotation. Like when Snowcrow writes the rotation, they don't put like, stow weapon as a hotkey that you have to press as part of the rotation.
Yeah, it is certainly one of those mechanics. Guild Wars 2 has quite a lot of these things, right? It has these slightly odd esoteric mechanics that you just need to be aware of if you really want to push your performance a little bit, I guess, which is certainly quite strange.
Like dodge jumping.
Yeah. Stuff like that is interesting because on the one hand, it's like, oh, this is actually a really interesting part of the skill expression of the game. But on the other hand, it's like, there are all of these barriers and kind of knowledge gates that players have to get through in order to perform as well as they might want to, right? Or in order to kind of progress as they're moving through the game. So it's very much a double-edged sword when it comes to these things. I think dodge jumping is a really good example because, man, would you remove dodge jumping from the game? That's actually very interesting. That's a good question. I think I'd lean towards no. But if you think about it, it is a very weird thing, like a weird consequence of the combat system that allows you to do this. And, I think that there are loads of examples like this. I think the one that is the most obvious, I guess, and the most prominent is actually weapon stowing. Like, weapon stow is kind of an unintended consequence, actually, of the way the combat system worked. It got added into the game. When did it get added into the game, actually? It was quite early on when they gave you that ability, I think, to do that. You could, of course, cancel your abilities using the escape key, but it's not actually exactly the same. It's a slightly different functionality. But it's a big advantage if you can do it.
There was like a thing that was like, I seem to remember very early on in PvP, you would get out of combat faster if your weapon was stowed. Or at least people thought you did.
Ooh.
yeah, people were like, oh, if you stow your weapon, like if you're running away from the fight from the point and you stow your weapon, you'll break combat faster. I think that was definitely like at least what people thought was happening, whether or not it really was.
Yeah, interesting. And this is slightly off topic, but I actually really want to bring it up because this came up again when I was talking to Preach recently, right? Is that the skill expression of Guild Wars 2, I think, actually complicates the meta a lot. Because it's really hard to tell if... Let's imagine that you see a Reaper in your group, and they're doing 5k DPS. You might go, holy shit, Reaper is trash, right? But then but realistically, it's just that player is maybe not very experienced on Reaper, and they're not doing very well. Because obviously the difference in output from, a very new Reaper to a very, very good Reaper is absolutely colossal, right? Whereas in other
MMOs, could have just had the wrong build gear combination on.
Exactly, and they were doing 5k DPS. And I think this also messes with perception, because a lot of the time, you very rarely... Okay, because here's the really big meme. Oh, Nike, I'm gonna get roasted for this one. Here's a big take. Let me tell you a little secret, guys. And here's the deal. Players who are typically more invested and more experienced and really practice their skills, they will massively gravitate towards the best builds, right? That's not to say that there aren't good players who play slightly weaker builds. It's absolutely not the case. There are actually loads of enthusiasts, right? I think, there's a big Reaper enthusiast, right, at SC who makes loads of videos about it. I think his name is Wested, I think, talking about Reaper, even though that's not like an Omega good build. There are great players who play slightly underperforming builds, but generally speaking, the best players gravitate towards the best builds. And this actually really hurts the perception, because it means that less experienced players play weaker builds, and that means, guess what? Less experienced players go into groups, don't perform as well. Everyone else looks at that and goes, hang on a minute, this build sucks. I never see anyone do well on this build, therefore it's not good, right? Which makes the entire problem even worse. Because all the tryhards play the best builds, and most people playing weaker builds are less experienced and therefore disproportionately perform poorly on those same builds, which again shifts the perception even more. And because there's such a big difference between a really good player and a really new player, that gets blown up even more, right? In WoW, right, a really, really good player might do, compared to a really, really new player, it might be like double damage. Preach said it's less than that. It's like 30%, right? Even if you kind of suck at the game, you're going to be 30% off a really good player. Think about that, guys, in Guild Wars 2. Seriously, think about that. Like, in this, the rating game, guys, a really good player versus a really not super good player, right? It's less than double. It's like 30%. It's like 50% more, right?
The interesting thing with that, though, is the game, like the DPS checks and the heal checks are tighter. So the fact that a bad player might only be 30% away from a good player actually makes them farther away from killing the boss than a bad player is in Guild Wars 2, where the DPS checks and the heal checks aren't very tight, so that the bad player might actually be closer to killing the Guild Wars 2 boss in that same scenario.
I think you're not wrong there, especially when it comes to like the harder content, the more stricter DPS check, of course, because of just the nature of the way that game operates. But I think it really shifts the perception of balance. Because in World of Warcraft, look, it's not like people aren't, meta slaves in that game. People absolutely are, right? If you're raiding in that game, or you're doing Mythic Plus in that game, people are obviously going to lean towards the strongest builds and the most efficient compositions. Obviously, people lean towards those things. But think how much more extreme it ends up in Guild Wars 2 because of the way players, or like the variability in player performance that can happen, right? In Guild Wars 2, if you're a really good player, you can do 5 times the damage of a new player. You can do 10 times the damage of a new player, right? In that kind of range. That's insane, right? And that looks super interesting. If you're an onlooker and maybe you're a new player, maybe you're like an intermediate player, you're going, wow, this build sucks. Whenever anyone plays it, they do 5k DPS. This is terrible. But in reality, the player skill variability really muddies the water, right? Whenever, and this happened a lot when I was playing Scourge, people could not understand this. I would do Doom CM, and I would raid sell Doom CM, and I'd be in really good groups, and I'd get top DPS on Scourge, against Renegades, and Renegade was doing about 37k DPS at the time, Scourge 29k. People were like, holy shit, how is this possible? I don't understand. 29k is less than 37k. What's going on? I don't get it. But of course, there's a multiple, variability of factors in there, like who's getting the mechanics. Scourge happens to be really good on that fight, right? Like I'm pretty good on Scourge, I guess, etc., etc., etc. And I think this really makes the entire equation a lot more complicated in Guild Wars 2 because of that variability, and it really muddies the water in this regard. And don't get me wrong, by the way, guys, I'm not saying that, it's bad that Guild Wars 2 is so skill sensitive. I'm just describing an effect of it. Look, you guys are all learning this very, very important skill. And this very, very important skill is understanding the difference between a descriptive and prescriptive claim, okay? I'm not saying, this is how it should be. I'm saying this is how it is. And these are some of the consequences that have happened because of the way this is, and some of the effects that we have to be aware of when we're navigating the world. Boom! There it is. Okay.
Do you think, just as an aside, that Preach was or is right not to use a DPS meter during his progression through the raids? Do you think he would find it interesting, perhaps, to find out that one of the DPS players in his group was doing less damage than the healers?
I think it would have been interesting, but maybe not that relevant. Because you're completely correct, of course. Their DPS wasn't super relevant, right? It wasn't really an issue for them.
They didn't kill the boss till they learned the mechanics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's completely fine that that they didn't really worry about that. I don't think it was super out. So I wouldn't say it was right or wrong. I don't think it was super important. The bottleneck with Guild Wars 2 raids is definitely, doing the fight correctly, right? Most of the time, like with a few exceptions, obviously. But yeah, is doing the fight correctly is what will get you the job done. And, surviving, reviving, applying boons, healing, right? All that kind of stuff. And you'll eventually get through it. You'll get through it. Obviously, more damage helps, right? But I don't think it was necessary. I think it could have been interesting, right? It would have been maybe interesting to see, what builds are doing really, really well. But I think the more interesting part was definitely like boon uptimes, right? And seeing the impact of boons and how effective that ended up being.
Yeah. So another observation to his progression that I thought was interesting was, it's been pointed out that his group, as scuffed as they were, their first VG kill was faster than like Snowcrow's first VG kill, right? And that is probably true for their first Sloth kill as well. And yes, there's reasons, power creep specifically, but also like roll compression and stuff. But the interesting thing is when they got to Wing 4, that's when the community has caught up. That's when the tide turned, and their first Wing 4 kills were slower than the best of the first kills. So it's interesting to see like where the power creep, where like the nexus was between power creep and community skill, and it happens to be at Wing 4.
Yeah, I do think that as you very much correctly asserted, it was a multitude of factors, right? Like people got a lot better at the game very, very quickly when raids came out, right? Raids were approached basically like dungeons or fractals with 10 people in them, right? That's it's like, well, I mean, that's what we've got now, so let's get in there and do that. That's how we're going to play this out. But of course, they were very different, right? Raids were very different. So players had a huge learning curve. And I think that whenever ArenaNet adds something hard to the game, the player skill goes up a lot. For example, I would say there was a major skill increase with Wing 5, right? Because Doom came out and it was like, whoa, this is different. This is actually really challenging us in a very different way to everything before that. right? And that's when people started figuring out that Scourge was busted, permanent protection was busted, right? All that kind of stuff. Because Doom was so different, and that was a huge player skill up, player knowledge up, strategy up. And I think it happened with HTCM again. I think that if ArenaNet want to have another Harvest Temple Challenge Mode level event, they need to make it way harder, actually. Seriously.
They need like 10 mechanics happening at once that require one individual person to deal with each of them. So like all 10 people have to be doing something. So, well, I mean, otherwise you'll get, Mela gets to play DPS and just sit at the boss and whack it.
Not anymore. He has to do something now. Okay, 9 people, so he can just do that, yeah. And Sanctuary, by the way, guys, I'm actually going to take credit for Sanctuary. That was kind of me. Sanctuary became popular after me and Mela duoed Sunquar Peak Challenge Mode on release day. Because I was like, oh man, we should use Sanctuary to break the Defiance bar. And we both ran Sanctuary, and after that, people started running Sanctuary a lot. No joke, that was actually kind of me. That was me and Mela. It was my idea, though. Mela will admit that. Boom. There it is. So yeah, that was like another part. Whenever ArenaNet released something challenging, there's obviously a big skill up as everyone comes together to solve this problem, right? And try to overcome it for sure.
And I was sort of thinking like the Wings 1, 2, and 3 came out quickly enough that I distinctly remember when Wing 3 came out having the thought that like we haven't really mastered Wing 2 yet to the point where we're like, coming up with like highly efficient speedrun strategies yet for the bosses, and Wing 3 is already like coming out. But then the layoff between Wing 3 and Wing 4, which I don't know how long that was. I think it was like over a year maybe, or like 10 months or 11 months, something like that. That the community had now 11 months to do the same raid wings over and over and over again, and had the DPS golem and DPS meters. So it was like, people had a lot of time to get good. So that when Wing 4 came out, like just the basic DPS of the good groups was like significantly higher than when Wing 3 came out.
This is a super fun topic. It's tangential, the balance, and I actually think it deserves a video or like a little stream conversation all to itself, actually. But this is actually one of the really interesting things about the Guild Wars 2 community, and the way the game plays out that actually it doesn't exactly affect balance, but it affects the community's interaction with balance. And it's exactly what you just brought up. Because there's not much content in the game, you naturally lean in towards speed killing, right? You naturally lean in towards more aggression, speed, efficiency, getting it done fast, right? And this is actually one of the things that I think makes the community a little bit rigid in the way it approaches the game, but also very much leaning towards experienced players, wanting to play with experienced players. Because the way that you play Guild Wars 2, you don't play this content. Ultimately, raids are not played for the challenge. They're essentially farm content that you speedrun, right? Like, that's what they are at this point. Because people have played them for years and years and years and years and years. So it's not good enough to just get your 2 gold, right? No one cares about 2 gold, right? It's just not that relevant for the vast majority of people who play instance content. This is even true of Fractals, by the way, guys. Even Fractals, ultimately, a lot of players don't care at all about the gold output. They're there just to have like a smooth, fast run where they can execute their rotations and see some big numbers, right?
That's why you have to GG at Bone Skinner if you fail CC. Yeah. Because I mean, what's the point? I don't care about the rewards for Bone Skinner, but I want that log, and I'm not going to get it if you guys don't press your CC buttons. So
exactly.
Start over.
Yeah. And yeah, players definitely enjoy this experience. And this also creates a bit of a disconnect between new players who haven't cleared the content and are very focused on getting their kills, and a lot of the experienced players who are just there for fun, right? They don't care about the reward, they're just there for fun. And that's where I think a lot of players are, actually. Because, people who raid have been around for ages. People who do strikes have been around for ages. People who do fractals, they've been around for years. Right? Years and years and years grinding these fractal challenge modes out. And this also skews the influence of balance, because obviously those players, they want to play the best builds so they can see the biggest numbers, they can get the fastest kill times, right? And have the most fun, right? And this is a really important issue to talk about because there is a big disconnect. I think a lot of players go, why on earth do you care about playing this build? It's only going to save you 5 seconds. Well, it's because the goal is not to be efficient with your time to get the reward as fast as possible or get the kill for the first time. The goal is to have as much fun as possible. And for a lot of players, it turns out that that is killing this boss as fast as we possibly can with like the fattest DPS, the slickest composition, and the most aggressive strategy that will at least push you a little bit as a player to execute this well enough that will kind of make your brain activate just a little bit after years of grinding the same content. And I think that's a very interesting and highly nuanced part of the meta game in Guild Wars 2 and the way people play the game, especially in content that realistically doesn't get that much content released for it, that does skew the way people interact with it and can be a little bit weird and jarring, I think, for newer players.
Yeah, you have to keep pushing things to new extremes. It's like, let's say you're a drug addict. You're chasing that first high. You got to find stronger and stronger drugs till one day you OD on fentanyl and you get kicked out of SC for e-dating. Exactly like that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that. I guess that can happen.
Yeah. But going back to the topic of things that they need to fix, Catalyst isn't fun, I don't think. I think the perception is that it's not a fun spec.
No, Catalyst isn't fun.
Yeah, so that is a thing that they could focus energy on redesigning for the June patch and making it fun.
Yeah. We're going all the way back in time here, but do you think there's a universe where they actually redesign some of these elite specializations?
Oh yeah, I think that's what they have to almost do.
Because Catalyst is just, it's not that interesting, right?
Redesign as in like scrap it and come up with a whole new spec that's like totally different in theme. That's not happening.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking more like Berserker, right? What they did with Berserker, or what they did with Scrapper, right? They pretty significantly changed them, right? They pretty significantly reworked.
I think they will do
stuff like that.
Yeah, they will definitely do stuff like that because, like I said, they're to the point where the numbers are fine on things, and it's like most of the tweaks are now at this point going to be 5% this way or that way, and it makes more sense that they're going to have, especially for their big patches, the bandwidth to do big overhauls. And there's definitely some specs that need that. Untamed, Catalyst, not fun. And they can fix those. Yeah.
I think I would like to see them do that because I think you can play with the numbers all you want, but sometimes you do need to actually change things in a slightly more significant way. That you can't just play with numbers, or you can't change cooldowns or make the rotation different, right? Or change this one spell. Sometimes you have to go a little bit further to actually get this done. I think they did this with Firebrand recently, of course, and that's like that was a pretty interesting change. I think that slightly controversial, I suppose. It was almost aimed a little bit at PvP, I think, to an extent, right, and PvE as well, to kind of tone it down a little bit. But yeah, I think they had some good results there. I think it's going in the right direction. There's definitely a few more things that need to be adjusted with stuff like Firebrand, but there are, it's improving, I think. And yeah, I think stuff like that for Catalyst is certainly what probably needs to happen. Maybe even stuff like Harbinger as well. I don't know. Maybe some people in the chat like Harbinger, but I don't like Harbinger, right? There it is. I said it, guys. I don't like Harbinger. I'm not a fan. I'm not a Harbinger enjoyer. I never have. I just don't like the spec. It's not even that it's bad, by the way. It's not bad. Harbinger is perfectly strong and playable as a damage option, even as a quickness option. Hell, there's even a heal build that actually is functional on Harbinger, actually, if you're into that sort of thing. But I just don't like it. It is Garbinger.
Trashbringer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could fix it. They could do stuff.
Yeah, I don't really have any good ideas. I'm just leaving that on the table. They just need to fix it. I'm just going to complain about it and say they need to fix it. That's relaxing, actually. I kind of like it.
Should be like each tonic is like a different kit almost. And like you drink this one tonic and it does like it warps your brain and puts you into this state, and then you drink your other elixir and it like puts you into this different state where you're all different.
Yeah.
I think it's an idea.
Which current elite specializations are in your mind uninstall tier?
Oh, elite specializations?
Yeah, elite, yeah, not the core, doesn't matter, right? Like, you know, elite specs. What's in uninstall tier currently?
There's nothing that bad. I would say probably for me personally, subjectively, Deadeye. I just would never play it. I even if Dagger Deadeye became like really good, it's pretty good already, but if it became like so good, I still wouldn't play it because I just have no interest in it. It's just terrible.
But everything else has kind of escaped uninstalled.
I mean, Untamed is pretty bad, and but especially I think after this patch, Untamed's going to get worse. Is that my understanding? Like it's going to become like. It's going to become both weaker and less fun.
I think
it's amazing.
Okay, I'm calling this now. I actually think they might revert that change for PvE. I think they might. Because yeah, they've tried to make Untamed a little bit not quite as good or not quite as weird with the mega cooldown reset, and that I think it's going to make a lot of the Untamed builds weaker, but yeah, as you say, crucially significantly more annoying and less fun to play. That is one of the ones that I think they will actually maybe go back on, because at the end of the day, I think everyone agrees on this, and ArenaNet have even acknowledged this themselves. Fervent Force, which basically says whenever you land a crowd control skill, it resets all of your cooldowns by 4 seconds, which obviously very powerful effect because it kind of works off itself, right? You get a CC, it recharges all your other CCs, so you spam them more and more, and you can just use a ridiculous amount of abilities.
Hell yeah.
With some really fun, really crazy wild builds. I find it a very fun build to play, actually. But yeah, essentially, that is kind of busted, obviously. But I think ArenaNet said that they want to rework it at some point and kind of maybe redesign Untamed a little bit, because it was also causing a lot of issues in PvP until somewhat recently. And they had to kind of change some of its very key abilities and make it work a little bit differently because, yeah, turns out it's pretty good in a lot of these scenarios. So yeah, Fervent Force needs to be just changed from the ground up, I think, if they want to get rid of it. Maybe it's fine. Maybe there's a universe where it's kind of okay, but who knows? Maybe not.
I think Dragon Hunter is, like, in a vacuum, it's okay, but in the context of the Guardian profession, considering it's basically just a bad willbender at this point, like it's an extremely bad willbender, yeah, I might call that uninstall tier. Like, that's...
Yeah, Dragon Hunter is a weird one. I did like what they did with reducing the defensive cooldowns that it has, but I feel like True Shot is going to be annoying because Longbow is pretty good, and Dragon Hunter in general is getting a couple of buffs across the board in terms of its damage output. But True Shot, now you're going to immobilize yourself and stand in place very frequently when you're playing that build, which I think that's not that much fun, right? Like dealing with that all the time, it's going to be a little bit like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is a thing, huh? But I mean, I guess you'll hit pretty hard, so you have that going for you, but still, maybe not that much fun. The Dragon Hunter. What are the things that I think are uninstalled here? By the way, guys, we're obviously joking here, just so everyone's aware. It's not. It's more like the fun factor here that we're talking about. I don't know, actually. I don't think I view anything as really, really not good in terms of the fun factor, the design element. Everything's pretty acceptable in my opinion. It's okay. It's all good.
It's very not very controversial.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm scared. I'm scared of mains. People who main things, they frighten me. And they're everywhere. They could be here right now. Do you know that?
I think hollow mains are pretty upset.
Wait, really?
They're not. Yeah, they think power hollow is weak, and they don't want to play Condi hollow. They just want power hollow to be good again.
Wait, isn't power hollow actually good though? Or am I just completely? Am I insanely out of the loop? Isn't power hollow actually pretty decent? I think it is good.
I'm pretty sure it's like Dragon Hunter.
Let's see. How much DPS does it do, guys? How much DPS does Power Hollow do? Here we go. Power Hollow is 38k DPS.
Yep, sounds pretty bad.
Wait, how is that bad? Is that just like
playing it? No, I don't see anyone playing it. Must be bad. That's the truth.
Nice. Yeah. And Scrapper's good too. Man, everything is so strong. Seriously, it's better than I thought. I'm looking at all the DPS. Everything is so insane right now. Holy shit. Look, guys. The top DPS build is 44k. And let's see, what's the worst DPS build in the game right now? It's going to be Reaper or something, isn't it? Okay, the worst DPS build in the game is it Condi Tempest, actually.
Oh, God.
Condi Tempest at 33,000 DPS. But seriously, that is so wild. Wait, is Power Berserker worse, actually? No, it's not. It's not. So yeah, isn't that insane, though? That is crazy to me. Oh yeah, Power Mech is 32k, but Power Mech is actually really good because it has like 1,000,000% DPS uptime. So yeah, even the very low-end DPS builds are actually insane. Because, I mean, you remember this, Nike, right? When, like, 30k was considered to be insane DPS, right? Like, 30k was like, holy shit, this was actually like a busted build. It's actually wild to me.
Yeah. When Wing 1 came out, it was like, whoa, 30k? Like, that's crazy spreadsheet numbers. Like, that's no one will ever hit that.
Yeah. Yeah, impossible to get 30k DPS. And now, I mean, well, most boon supports are hitting that type of number, and most DPS classes, like, they're 10,000 DPS above that. I mean, that is actually wild. That's crazy. You know what I'm not looking forward to in the next patch?
5-man Facet of Nature?
No. Ever having an Alacrity Mirage in my group. Because Mirages, this is going to be now, you want some controversial takes? Let's talk about this. Whenever I have an Alacrity Mirage in my subgroup, I never have Alacrity. Ever. Ever. Yeah. It's maybe 50% at best.
Pressing their dodge button, not easy.
Okay. And now it's going to be worse because they're they're halving the boon duration, right, on the Alacrity on the dodge.
Now they have to play full Ritualist.
Yeah. You're going to have to get the Ritualist gear. You're going to have to get more boon duration, and the uptime's not going to be there.
That's good.
I'm going to be sad about that, because you know what? Actually, you know what? Would you rather have 0% Alacrity uptime or 50%? I almost feel like 50% is worse in a way.
At least if it was 0, I could just learn my rotation with 0 and be like, this is my world now. But when it's 50%, you're like, hell yeah. And then
it just goes away.
Then you deflate. Yeah. I don't want to deflate. I want to be inflated.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that is spicy, actually. That is very spicy. Yeah. Funnily enough, I don't really have that much to say about balance other than that. I do
think the Draconic Echo change is so you have, like, on one hand they're trying to, like, bop hot quickness hybrid Firebrand, right?
Okay.
So that isn't, like, the obvious go-to quickness DPS hybrid in every group. But then it would have made Quickness Herald, like, God tier, because it didn't get bopped and it has 10-man Facet of Nature. So they had to nerf Facet of Nature so that Quickness Herald doesn't become, like, the God tier required for every group. Now, like, I think there might be a little bit of a shakeup in the meta in that regard. Like, not necessarily a shakeup, but an openness. Like, it'll be less, like, of a given of which one you take, and you can take the ones that you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Herald is still going to be very strong. And in fact, I think I'd probably lean to it still being the go-to. I really like the boons it provides. And yeah, obviously it is somewhat significant to not have the, free boon duration essentially to the other subgroup, which is really, really nice, really good quality of life and just a nice bit of support that you can provide. Making that only your own party, I think it's still strong. It will help out your healer potentially, or maybe the other support will get helped out a little bit there. But it's still pretty good, I would say. Overall, it will be an incredibly good build. And to be honest, look, maybe am I the only one who's cynical about this? I feel like they just forgot to change it to. I don't think they even did this like as a nerf. They just forgot to change it to 5-man. No,
I think they were just trying to push it. I think it was a case of, how we always say, like, just because you buff something to be equal with the old thing isn't good enough. It has to be better than the old thing to get people to try it, because otherwise, if they're both equal, then people will just stick with the thing they know and they won't try the new thing. So I think you have to push the new thing harder.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think they pushed quickness DPS Herald to the point where people are like, okay, this is actually good, and people are actually playing it. Now they can tone it down a little bit, make it a little bit less pushed.
Yeah, I think that's actually an important part of balance. Is actually a bit funny. I do think that you have to go quite hard to get people to switch. It's why I quite like they've gone pretty hard on Reaper, right? I think this has been one of the, not exactly frustrations, but one of the criticisms I've maybe had of their balance approach is that they'll go, okay, we'll make this a little 5-10% better, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. I think sometimes you just go, you know what? Especially as they're doing regular patch, you have to do regular patches for this approach. I think this is how they do it in League of Legends, right? They'll just say, you know what? This champ is kind of busted, this patch. We'll nerf it afterwards, but a little bit busto for a while. And then they'll repeat that process with everything. And I think that does generate good results, because it means that people go, oh shit, my spec's crazy, let's go. And they all start playing it, and then people try it out, right? And you end up with a really good mixture, and just, you know, everyone's kind of trying out loads of different stuff, because everything could be busted at any time. I think the downside of that actually is a bit of a Guild Wars 2 thing. I think players in this game are a little... because it's a bit more of a casual game, people don't want to change builds very often. So I think you have to kind of make things really strong, or make things really weak, without necessarily affecting the build, so that players don't have to adjust their playstyle that much. This kind of happened with the Mesmer stuff, right? When they were reworking Chrono a lot, and you had to change your build quite a lot. That was quite frustrating for a lot of players, understandably so. But I do think shaking stuff up and being quite aggressive with the numbers is a very effective way of getting very positive reactions and perceptions from the community, and also actually having an impact on how people actually play the game.
Yeah, and the low information players who, like, for us, a balance patch is big content, right?
Yeah,
like, it gives us
true.
a lot to talk about, a lot to test, a lot to play around with. But for like a lower commitment player who is maybe lower information, like, balance patches can come and go, and they're not on their radar as much. And that's a learned behavior, because the players have been conditioned to think that, like, oh, like, the biggest thing that I can expect in a balance change is, like, you know, like 5% change to my class. And so maybe when I log in 3 months from now, I'll go, oh, they changed that by 5%. Cool, man. Awesome. But then if you condition the player base to go, every 3 months, shit is going to hit the fan, then now you have players that are engaged and will check in for every balance patch and, like, actually pay attention and get, like, either hyped, or they'll get angry. And both things create discourse and are good for the alive perception of the game. Yeah.
Absolutely. It definitely is a big thing, especially when it comes to the other game modes, right? You know, for the World vs. World and PvP players, this is all they've got. And this might be everything they get. You know, I think that's why they were a bit disappointed that there wasn't much going on in terms of PvP and World vs. World in this patch, right? Because that's kind of the content that you get. You know, you got to wait for alliances, I guess, after that. But yup. That's the deal. Balance is important. It is very, very important. Although it's not too bad, to be fair, in World vs. PvP. I'd say it's solid, actually, in both those game modes. If we were having a PvP balanced TeaTime and a World vs. World balanced TeaTime, I think you'd actually have some pretty positive messaging as well from those game modes, too. Things really are quite solid overall in the entire game.
For World v. World, they need to make the boon range even smaller.
Oh.
So that you're forced to ball up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mag can't beat them anymore.
Oh.
Because if you force Mag to get into a ball, then they're playing right into your hands, and you can smash your ball into them, and Mag won't have the advantage. They won't outskill you anymore. So that's the solution to Mag, is make all boons like 50 range instead of like 300 or 600.
So you have no choice, but you have to go full melee. There's nothing else you can do.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. And that could be good content. But anyway, I think that actually might kind of wrap things up for this TeaTime today. Maybe there'll be a little dark TeaTime afterwards as well. I think Nike has some stuff he wanted to talk about, so, you know, stay tuned for that potentially. But yeah, dude, man, that's That's like one of those. No, never mind. Actually, that's an illegal move, guys. I can't just like tell you there's more content if there actually isn't more content, or maybe you can't see it because you're on YouTube. But anyway,
that's why you got to watch the stream.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're on YouTube,
you got to get on Twitch,
don't pleb
guys.
out.
Yeah,
get here live.
You've got to get in here. It's the only way. But anyway, gamers, that's going to about wrap things up. Hope you have enjoyed the show. Definitely let us know what you think. And of course, leave some comments. Tell us, what are your thoughts on balance? What are your thoughts on some of those issues? I'm very curious in particular about everyone's thoughts on perception and the way the community interacts with the game, because this is definitely a topic that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I'm very intrigued what everyone makes of that. Maybe you think I'm right. Maybe you think I'm totally wrong. I actually don't know. I haven't entirely made up my mind. I'm still exploring this. We're going on an exploratory journey of the Guild Wars 2 community together, guys. Okay, it's a fresh topic. We've never talked about this before, right? Definitely never. So it's time to dive in and delve in deep into this topic and see if we can make something of it. But anyway, thanks for watching, gamers. And before we go, Nike, what are you up to these days? And actually, you know what? When are you renaming? You're not Nike DNT anymore. You're Nike QT. What's up with that?
I'm not going to rename. I'm not going to rebrand. I don't need to do that. But yes, as part of Condor Dusk, did have to join an EU speed clear guild. I have brought myself to QT, and I've been welcomed with open arms, and it's great. It's going really fun.
Okay.
Yep. And again, this is a plea. If you're a good NA player, please come to EU. It's very important that you get off of that dying server, because when a ship sinks, it creates like a vortex, and the people who wait too long to get away from it get sucked in and underneath and drowned. And so if you don't get off NA now, you might not be able to. You might end up in a bad situation.
Wow.
Yeah. And it might be like the Titanic, where you're on the piece of wood floating, and the e-girl that you met on NA pushes you off the piece of wood, and you drowned in the icy waters.
What?
And she gets scooped up by an EU lifeboat, and she's out of there on EU dating someone in snow crows, and you're like, help, help, and she's sinking under the waves. Yep. So come to EU, please.
Okay, and on that note, I think that'll about wrap things up, gamers. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you all very much. Make sure check out Nike's stream, some QT Omega EU speedrunning raids, and definitely follow the stream and subscribe and leave your comments here as well. That's all we've got. Okay, I'm a little worn out after riding that tournament yesterday. I'm disheveled, I'm bedraggled, but that'll do it for now, gamers. Thanks for watching. I'll be right back in a moment on Twitch, and for everyone on YouTube, we'll see you next time. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take it easy, gamers. See you next time.